Good afternoon, Professor Spooner.
Good afternoon, Frank. A lot has happened today. A press conference in Washington, a new appointment to the cabinet, comments about it on Google News, and but worse, much more important than that, and much worse than that, is the bombings in Baghdad, and even worse in Pakistan. And the one in Pakistan, I think, is particularly interesting. It's not the first time that it's happened, but it's a new sort of problem in Islam, which has to do with who's a Muslim and who's not a Muslim. And whereas in Christianity, some time ago, we got used to the idea that you can be all sorts of different types of Christian. Islam, for very what shall I say, for reasons that make good sense in terms of the history of the arguments, though not a good sense in moral terms or larger philosophical terms, perhaps, have always had a problem about any sort of differentiation of identity within Islam, because the Prophet nearly 1500 years ago was very clear about the fact that a Muslim is a Muslim and belongs to the Muslim community, which is one community, which gives them a reason to think in global terms for one homogeneous community.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that's going on today in Islam generally, as we progress towards globalization, is bigger and bigger, more and more aggressive rebellions against anybody who seems to be threatening that larger identity.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, this is, I've seen hints of this argument elsewhere, that identity is a big problem under globalization more generally. It's a special problem in Islam because of the history of Islamic thinking, but I think it's a problem generally. I think that as we all become connected to larger and larger numbers of people, the identities of the past have to somehow be revised to meet the situations that we're moving into now, and that gives people a lot of difficulty. They're not quite sure where they belong in a globalizing society, and it's a difficulty that that affects people differently in different parts of the world, because different parts of the world are at different stages in this process of getting involved with larger and larger numbers of people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've discussed this actually in the past, because your observation is I think exactly correct. In the more globalized areas, or the areas that have at the forefront of the accelerated pace of globalization, there's a continual assault of breakdown missiles aimed at local identities, whether it be a cultural identity or religious identity or even a national identity. And as younger people become more exposed to these globalization tools, if you will, for lack of a better term, I think you're exactly correct. They're not inculcated with those original hardwiring of identity that older generations have had, and they're more susceptible, reasonably so, they're more susceptible to changing identities and extra-national or extra-religious or extra-cultural identities. And it does leave people adrift. There's no doubt of that.
No, I think each of these things have come up before. The unevenness between different parts of the world in this process, and the problems that come with the gradual expansion of the arenas within which people interact. But I think that it's becoming clearer and clearer that they're all connected to each other, and uh, in the same way that the whole idea of the nation state became a new identity beginning some 400 years ago, and was the way the whole world was organized from the top down largely in the 20th century. And now the nation state isn't satisfying that need for identity so well as it was. It's becoming a bigger and bigger problem. And after all, before the nation state, the main identity was religion.
Correct.
You were either a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist, or to some extent the language you spoke. But language became a much more important factor of identity, I think, when we had printing and national languages and everybody was literate, so that you could communicate in one language to a much larger number of people in written form than had been possible before the age of printing. So if you think in terms of the shift from religion as identity to language as identity to nation state as identity, and now we're not quite sure. And the problem is some people are very concerned about losing the identity of the past and not sure where they're going to fit into the world as it's changing.
Well, it's an interesting observation because I have a confession to make. I've been doing these shows with you now for a couple of years, and I must admit to sort of feeling detached in some respects as we're having this globalization discussion, especially when we talk about the uneven rate of globalization and its effect on those not progressing as fast as other areas. But I must say that emotionally, I have been feeling adrift. I have been wondering whether or not I fit in any longer. I've been given a little bit of a taste of this insofar as being an American citizen in this country now with the current government and the policies that are being espoused and the castigation that I'm feeling from the government, that not only am I a member of the minority, but I'm also a roadblock to progress. And I feel uncomfortable. Now, I understand I'm a lawyer. I understand my rights and all this stuff. I understand all that. But it's just a small feeling. Now, I can only imagine how a real feeling would be if I was somebody, for example, that ISIL might approach who really is feeling disenfranchised, really is feeling cut off from his religious beliefs or his cultural beliefs. It's a very, very powerful kind of tool, as is evidenced by, for example, the forces that elected the current American president, who happenstance-wise happened to tap into that and managed to touch that vein.
I think the irony is that America, that was the most progressive of all societies 50 years ago, or certainly most of the 20th century, is now being accused of trying to, what should I say, accused of being against globalization.
Yes.
By doing all sorts of things since the 20th of January that actually get in the way of processes that are major factors of globalization.
Yeah, it's very disconcerting, and there's not really a recourse, and I suppose I would be classified as one of the 1%, and there's no recourse for me. So what about the other 99%? What about somebody in the lower 10%? What recourse do they have? I mean, this is a very powerful feeling, and I can sense the loneliness and the feeling of being adrift that is out there. In fact, let me turn the telescope completely around. who is it that are fervent adherents and believers and advocates of globalization?
Who are the advocates?
Yes.
Do we need advocates?
No, we don't, because there's a tidal wave that's coming anyway.
Who are the people who are interested in have a positive interest in change?
Yes.
That's a very interesting question, and because I think that everybody is more interested in identity than in change.
I would say so.
China and Russia and Europe even, and certainly America, are very interested in who just exactly what they are, and don't want to lose that. And yet the process of globalization is weakening, is threatening their sense of identity. So it's going to be interesting but of course this is depending on how you look at it, it's not a fast process. We don't know how far it's going to get in our lifetimes, or how long it's going to take before we can say, well, we're certainly further ahead on that track now than we were when we were talking about it before. But it seems as though all the things that used to tie us to a particular identity are weakening.
Yes.
And yet now, for example, Africans will talk about themselves as African, as one identity,
Mm-hmm.
which is new,
Yes.
but much larger
Yes.
than any identity that was available before. So it's depending upon the history of the particular situation, it works differently.
Well, probably 1,000 years from now, when the history books look back on this time, much as we look back, say, at the time of Charlemagne, this will be just regarded as a little blip, sort of a mid-course correction, when humanity decided to focus on their identities. And I don't know. I don't know how this is all going to turn. You can't turn globalization off. You can't postpone it for a 5-year period while everybody adjusts. I mean, a very interesting thing to do, by the way, if you're ever completely bored, is rent a movie from maybe the 1970s or 80s and just watch it. And you'll be fascinated at the lack of communication. They don't have cell phones. They don't have the ability to communicate instantly. They can't read the news every second of the day. They can't send a text message across the world. I mean, these are poor, isolated cave dwellers living in London and New York in the 1970s. I mean, you just like hit your head. You're saying, my God, I can't believe civilization was like that. And I was in high school then and in college then. You were teaching in a university then. Things are happening so quickly that no wonder people can't adjust.
However, we have had the BBC for what,
since
100 years now?
Yes, that will remain. The old gray lady. Yes.
So, I mean, this is what makes it so difficult, that most things change all the time, but you can always find things that don't seem to be changing. And so it's very difficult to formulate general principles that cover everything.
Indeed. Well, all right, Brian. We appreciate this opportunity to chat with you today, and we'll see how much things change by a week from today.
Okay.
Thank
See you
you.
then.
All right. Bye.